Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Oh no, what's going on? All right, we're live. We're again going to be doing it on YouTube. We're just testing a few things out, making sure everything is working. Boop, boop, boop. Looks like it is so far. I'm digging it. I don't know if this is going to help or not, but my goal is to probably just consolidate to one platform. It's a little easier for me to manage. CAG Bash review. Boop boop. All right. So it's a little bit easier to manage for me. Whoa, whoa, guy. That's nope. That's not what we wanted. Cancel that. So, uh, I think we can just close this out now. I hope. I'm still learning the ins and outs of the YouTube live stuff, so I'm sorry. Going to be a little bit slow to start. Perfect. It's working. All right. That's what I like to see. Copy. And again, apologize for the slow start. So this last weekend, I went to CAG Bash. It's in Hamilton, which is just outside of Cincinnati for CincyCon. Really cool little town. I say little, it's probably not small. There we go. Share now. Now we're doing it. Look at us go. We're awesome. We're the best. All right. Okay, so again, apologize. Let's dive right in. 60 player GT was a lot of fun. 5 rounds. I took my boys. I was gonna do Drukari, but I needed a break. The army was just exhausting me, and I had been kind of slowly discovering some interactions in that army that were really just wearing me out and wearing me thin. And so I kind of made the decision to play my orcs. I played them a little over a week ago in an RTT and did really well. And decided, because I completely forgot about list submission, that I was playing the exact same list at CAG Bash. And I have no complaints about how everything went and how it went down. Before we get started, again, a lot of my viewers are coming from subscribers. I really appreciate that. It just shows what kind of good community we are building. So please just share the videos. Let's grow the community. Let's make it bigger so I can continue to kind of, work on content and we can continue to grow as a community. The one thing I will tell you is when and if the new edition comes out, and I can't speak on it much, right? Like I can't discuss rumors or anything, but what I can say is that when and if it comes out, I want to be there to help everybody learn it, right? I want to be making videos to help everybody kind of work through any nuances and changes that might have happened for the new edition. So make sure we're sharing, subscribing so we can grow a community and we can get everybody just on the same page and start moving forward. As always, I am not sponsored by, they do not pay me, but I am working with militarygamingcommand.org. I will be organizing a fundraising event, and then we will be doing some events in the future to help kind of promote their cause. They do great things with veterans who are wounded, veterans who are injured, and soldiers that are not people who are not veterans but actually active duty. And it's not just soldiers, it's Marines, it's Air Force, it's any service member. And they use video games to kind of help support them in their PTSD or injury or whatever they have going on. And it's such a good cause. And it's one that, as a veteran, is pretty near and dear to me. So I'm really just honored and thankful to be able to help them in any way that I can. So I'm going to be kind of helping to spearhead a tabletop front for them, and I'm really excited and we're looking forward to it. Thanks again. Let's start with the list. Oh, that's not good. My head is covering it. Look at that head. What a gorgeous head. So it was the same as my RTT list. So it was the Evil Sons, Fast Attack Detachment. I had the War Trike with the Roadkiller and Shaka Hull. I had the War Boss in Mega Armor with Res Mechas Red or Paint and Faster Than Use. And I had a third character. Oh, Cowboy Larry. Yep. And Cowboy Larry, he's not on the list, but that's just a knob on Smash-A-Squig. That's just how we refer to him colloquially. And for those of you that don't know what that means, that just means in our regional dialect or our regional vernacular. I was an English major in college, so I'm not like flexing with a big vocabulary. I just know a couple of weird words and I like to use them. Other than that, I'm a total idiot. It's all right. War Boss in Mega Armor with Red or Paint and Faster Than Use. I did have 2x10 Grots, a 5-man Commandos, 5-man Mega Knobs, Dub Killsaw, 10 knobs with Big Choppas. I had 2 by. Oh, because it's on the next page. I was like, whoa, I'm missing a lot here. 2x4 Coptas, 1x10 Stormboys, 2x5 War Bikes, a wagon with a 5 plus plus and the Ard case and Def Rolla, and then 1x3 Dreads. I might be missing one or two small things, but this is the core of my list. I will say Cowboy Larry had Ed Wappa's Kill Choppa, and then he had Brutal But Cunning. And let's see, Ed Wappa's. Yeah, so that was it. Before we dive into it, there's a couple things I want to point out. Roadkiller is you can put it on a vehicle when it charges on a 2-up. Your target, you pick a unit within engagement range, they take a D3 mortal wounds. Shaka Hull is whenever a unit resolves melee attacks against you, on a 4-up, they take a D3 mortal wounds. So that one's cool because you can actually pop that multiple times in one turn, right? It's pretty neat in that regard. Give me one more honking second. There we go. I got it. I'm the best. Yay. I'm not the best. I'm sorry. Okay, so it's one of those where it wasn't super relevant most games, but it was handy to have because a lot of people would either have to dedicate something to just completely kill it, or they were risking just taking mortal wounds. And his melee isn't great, but it's not terrible. He's still an orc, so he still has some solid melee. So that's kind of neat. Also is probably a waste of points. There's probably more efficient uses of the roughly 135 points that it costs, plus the one command point, but it was funny. So round one, I got Custodes because of course I did. There were like a million Custodes players, and it was awful. Uh, Let's move you so hopefully everybody can see a little bit better. Dude was actually super nice, and he was genuinely a Custodes player. He wasn't just somebody who bought a bunch of Custodes and is just meta hopping. He had like this really cool big banner he had made and all kinds of other stuff. And he was just a super awesome dude. I had a lot of fun playing with him. And yeah, it was roughly what, like a 26, 27 point game. But it was one of those where the game was actually closer than it looks on the score. And it really came down to turn 4, turn 5, and the fact that I had absolutely no obsec, right? So it was a super fun game. He was real nice. I also positioned and deployed a little poorly, and my Gretchen were just not in a good position to get good bits. It was on abandoned sanctuaries, and I kind of miscalculated my distances and didn't get my Gretchen in position to get some good bits early. So I arguably missed probably another 4 points on that. Potentially 6. But that's just, it is what it is. It's lessons learned. I haven't really played on abandoned sanctuaries in a long time, and especially not with orcs. So it was one of those where a lot of it was just being out of practice. I also, man, I took no prisoners, but I just didn't have a good secondary into him. And he gave up a lot. I just knew that I probably wasn't going to kill a lot. And that is what it is. It's one of those where I think ultimately he probably still wins this game. But if I had had some OBSEC And I didn't even give my orable gets, right? Like I even forgot to do that because it was one of those last minute, oh shit, I need to put this list in. So I didn't have horrible gets the whole game. So I had 0 OBSEC. And if I'd have had even 2 units of OBSEC, we're probably looking at him scoring. Man, honestly, we're probably looking at him scoring 12 less in second or primaries easily, and me scoring 12 more, and that's a 24-point jump, right? And that 24-point jump is huge because that makes it a much closer game. And it also, because of the secure the sanctuaries, arguably could have scored a couple there. Like it was definitely a game that I could have won, but him having all OBSEC and me having none definitely exploited some of the weaknesses, and he was a good enough player that he just exploited them. He knew how to work it. Was like I said, was super awesome though. He was a super nice guy. It was a good game. Did not walk away from that going, oh, poo, I lost. This is the worst. Um, it says 16 points on the slide, but like I said, once it's all said and done, if the game plays out exactly the way it did, it's actually more than that. Because I do remember how the primaries ended up shaking out because I was kicking myself in the butt for not having OBSEC. Some key moments, man. So Cowboy Larry rolled up, and again, it's just a knob on Smash a Squig, but he gave a 5-man of Warden's the old boy howdy, and just like soloed the whole squad. Uh, and like I said, like the look on his name, oh gosh, Scott, yeah. The look on Scott's face was just like, what? And then we went through the interaction a little bit, and he was like, holy cow. That's absurd, but hilarious. It wasn't like, oh, that's bullshit. Why do you have this? It was just one of those where he was just like, oh no. So he had to make sure that Larry went away, and he did. But Larry definitely traded up, right? He's 65 points plus his relic and warlord trait, and he took out 5 wardens, and it was just like, it's funny. I'm laughing. Outside of that, nothing really crazy happened. Like I said, the lack of OPSEC is really just what kind of gave me the old poopy duty, and it definitely hurt me. Round 2, I got guard. So for those of you who are going to GTs right now, or even just going out to tournaments with a lot of meta hoppers, just be prepared for probably about 30 to 40% of all the players to be bringing guard or custodes. So that is what it is. Oh well. Super nice guy. Uh, really, really fun game. Really tight game, as you can see. Um, guard is tough to play against, and you have to kind of play against them the way you would Tau. Like they have that Tau kind of shooting right now. Ultimately, I'm not going to dig into it right now, but ultimately, I think there's a few things that just need to come down or go up in points. But other than that, the interactions aren't like crazy. They do have 2 auto take secondaries that made it tough, and I went into this going, okay, I need to see if I can at least shut down one of them. And I did, right? I went first this game. I think I went first in round 1. I did. And I did well with behind enemy lines and get the good bits. As you can see, I basically capped both. Bring it down, I killed 2 tanks, right? Or I think I killed 2 sentinels and 1 tank is actually how this came out. And it was kind of a slog. But me going first allowed me to kind of jump up behind terrain and hide things really well and get like a good kind of staging point. And what that let me do is kind of bounce up to him in waves, and I was able to turn one charge him, right? What helped me was that he deployed his Cassicans kind of poopy, and I was able to tag them turn 1, the ones with the relic, and that kind of hurt him. Right? So he just kind of put them in a building thinking they were safe. And I told him straight up, like, hey, dude, I do have a relic. It lets me advance and charge. My Storm Boys auto advance 6. My bikes auto advance 7. So they have a 20, 23-inch kind of threat range plus charges, so just so you know. And he was like, yeah, all right, dude. And then he kind of positioned his Kashikans so I could tag them turn 1 and squad wipe them and was able to get, some behind enemy lines right off the bat. And right away, just hampering his ability to jump a unit and just delete 2 to 3 of mine was like instantly good for me, right? He killed most of my vehicles. I think my battle wagon lived through this game. That's the only game it lived through. But a lot of that was just because he tagged it with his railgun, knocked it down to like 6 wounds, and I already got what I needed out of it, so it just sat on an objective behind some terrain the rest of the game. Obviously, he scored 15 on inflexible command because like that secondary is absurd. The fact that you can easily cap it within the first 3 turns of the game, that's going to need some tweaks in my opinion. Not that they shouldn't have one that's easy to score, but having 15 points for simply just having models on the table, because that's all it is for a lot of it. Like, yeah, if you kill a unit, you get points, but again, like, you could have 12 points for just having models on the table in 3 turns. No actions, no nothing. You're just there. You just do it. That's kind of a weird interaction, and it'll probably get toned down a little bit. We'll see. I was able to basically keep him off of objectives because of the fact that I went first. I was able to, like I said, stage things up and then just tag him on. It was recover the relics, which has got the kind of weird triangle. It's probably easier if I just show you. Da, 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 da. I'm gonna sing you a song while we wait for me. All right, so it's this mission right here. So we've got here in the deployment zone, here and here. Now, don't get me wrong, my good bits, I was able to just camp in these objectives here and just max that super quick also. So I get that I also had an easy one, but mine's at least like not an auto 15, right? Like on abandoned sanctuaries, I probably should have taken a different, secondary. I don't know what I would have taken, but I probably should have just taken a different one. So I was able to basically come up here and then wreck him off of a secondary, come up here, wreck him off of a secondary, and then he had to spend, like, only having one, he had to spend time coming back to beat me off, coming back to beat me off. Uh, Sorry for the wording there. So it was one of those where, again, super fun game. Uh, Bring It Down was tough. I don't have a lot of good shooting in orcs, and I definitely don't have good shooting for a T8, T9 2-up save army, right? So I have to get into melee, and if I don't get into melee, I'm just not killing anything. All right. And again, I think we covered most of this. And like I said, the 23-inch, and this is exactly what he said. He was like, man, you told me it was a 23 advance in charge, but when I hear it, it's very different than seeing it. Like, I know you said it, but when you started moving models, I was just like, wow, that's so far. And Larry did kill a Lehman Russ that game. So again, and I think he actually killed 2 if I remember right. It might have been my Meganobs, one of them, but I think he killed 2. So again, good trade ups. And my goal going into this was if I kill all his infantry, I can at least shut off boots on ground. And that's basically what happened, right? Is I killed so much of his infantry that he just like could only get so much on that secondary. Round 3, I hit Ynnari. So the score's not right on here. It says 87 or 80 to 77. He and I had to go through and fix scores on both our ends a couple times. But it really was just because we were both tracking. But the bottom line is I ended up winning by like 5 or 6 points. And it was kind of a weird game. He was a very odd kind of fella. He's nice enough, like he wasn't rude or mean, but he was very socially awkward. Which I mean, we play Warhammer, so that's kind of the norm. But it's just one of those where we started playing, and he just kind of gave off that vibe that no matter what I knew, he just knew more, right? Because like I started talking to him about my army and what I had, and he's like, "Oh, I already know what orcs do. I know them really well. I play with a guy all the time who plays orcs," and I was just like, "Yeah, all right, dude." But then he like shot at my commandos, and I was like, cool, it's scatter lasers. I have a 3-up save because they're in cover. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. They add 2 to their armor save when receiving the benefits of cover against all attacks. So if I'm receiving the benefits of, cover, I'll get a 4-up in melee or a 3-up in shooting, blah, 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 blah. He's like, no, I don't think so. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, can I see that? So I pulled it up and I showed it to him. He was like, oh, all right. And we had a couple interactions like that. And it really just let me know that whoever he's playing with doesn't know the codex maybe as well as I do. And I hammered him on primaries. And that was one of the mistakes I made is I accidentally gave him too many primary points because he had himself at a different one and we talked it out and it was just like, oh, you know what? I accidentally tagged you for more than you should have had. And we worked it out. I took Abhor the Witch, which was rough, but a lot of that had to do with, it's elves. They're very mobile. He can hide them, but also because of how I ended up playing primaries. Like I was very aggressive on my primary objectives to try to keep him off of the objectives because this was Data Scry Salvage. So we'll actually show you that one real quick. And so going into this, knowing I'm playing an elf army with my orcs, I already was like, okay, I have a very distinct advantage because I have the extra units that I can throw them onto objectives and force him to try to like my goal was to try to make him spread himself too thin, and he very much did, right? Like he ended up and again, it's probably just easier if I do this. So he ended up like moving units out this way and moving units out this way instead of maybe dedicating to one half of the board with everything. And that allowed me to just kind of clear him out and then kind of close in around him. And it worked very well. And he played his army well, don't get me wrong. He definitely did. It's just we both went into it with a plan and I got to execute mine. And that's really what it came down to. Um, some key moments in that game. The end of the game was a total wild ride. We had to recalculate no prisoners a few times, and a lot of that was because as I was calculating, he kept trying to like ask me questions and argue with me, and I'd be like, "All right, so I'm just going to stop and start again." And then I'd start going, and then he'd like start going again. So I had to restart like 3 or 4 times, and finally I was just like he had a friend with him, and I just looked at his friend because his friend was also just getting like, "Come on, man, just shut up and let this guy count his points." Right? So we ended up I just was like, here's my list, you calculate it, here's what he killed. You're a semi impartial third party and he's not going to sit here and ask you a bunch of questions, right? uh so it ended up he needed like a 1 to win on RBD because he was just doing it with a biker. And when he did it, he got the 1. And I was like, oh shit, cool, man. And then we realized that we forgot to score 2 Abhor the Witches. So it ended up putting me back on top again. So the whole, like I said, the whole end of the game was just kind of weird. And we had to sit down for a little bit and just like recalculate some things. And that happens because we were both like really intense on this game. Not like angry intense, but just like focused. Because it was one of those where I know with the Incarn, if I'm not careful, that Incarn will punish me, right? Behind enemy lines, the good bits were clutch. I got my Grots killed early because I kind of got them a little bit out of position, but I was still able to score enough with them to keep me ahead, and because he had to spread himself too thin. And so, again, like I said, the end of the game, super weird because he killed the Death Dread, it exploded, killed one of his warlocks for 3 points, knocked because I had already like beat the shit out of the Incarn, knocked the Incarn down to 1 wound, right? And then the Incarn killed the other Death Dread, and then it exploded and then killed the Incarn. And it was just like, okay, man. But it's one of those where he got a lucky RBD and I got a lucky Abhor the Witch, and if neither of those happened, I still beat him. So it's just one of those where it's just like, sure, whatever. Uh, Cowboy Larry did just one shot a 5-mana Banshees and a Viper, so I at least got my points out of him. And so the big turning point I think for him was because I was able to get a lot of damage on the Incarn, and it was like with some dumb shit, right? I shot it with Coptas, and man, So you want to talk about a unit that'll catch people off guard, even if they quote unquote know orcs extensively, is Coptas. And especially because of how I play them. Like I think most people are used to when they see them on the table, they're Goffs because that's what everybody brings. So they're just like, yeah, all right, strength 7, exploding 6s, blah 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 blah. But when I can move them 32 inches in a single uh, movement phase, like that dude was just like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah. And I don't even have to shoot with them. So what I ended up doing was advancing them. Got like a 5, which is a 6 because of Evil Sun. So I got to move them like 21 inches and then spent my 1 CP to move them another 16 in the shooting phase. And he was like, can I see that? And I was like, yeah. And I showed it to him. And again, I get it. Like, that's a lot of mobility. And that will definitely catch people off guard. So when I did it, he was just like, "Can I see that?" And I was like, "Sure, man." And I showed him, and he was like, "Oh." And we got to a turn where he finally just looked at me. He's like, "You know what? It's obvious you actually know this book way better than anybody that I know. So I'm just gonna trust you for here on out." And I was like, "I don't mind that you're asking to see things, buddy. I really don't. It happens a lot." Because of how well I know this book, I tend to find interactions that will cause people to be like, "Wait, what?" So but no, he was a good dude. Fun game. Like I said, just a little weird. Some weird interactions there. Uh, and then round 4, I hit GSC. Also, just another great dude. And that's one thing I want to say immediately is everybody I interacted with at this event, super nice, super friendly. I'm sure there were a couple of like sweaty neckbeards. I just didn't hit any, so that was cool. But this dude, again, phenomenal, good player, knew his army really well. Uh, and again, behind enemy lines and good bits were clutch for me. And I did not screw up my good bits this game. Yes, I lost my grots and I had to kind of do them with some different units, but that had less to do with me and more to do with just like, hey, I'm going to come out of deep strike 3 inches away and shoot your Gretchen. Yeah, all right. Like, I can't do anything about that, homie. You know, and I took no prisoners. He had more than enough points. He didn't really have any vehicles. For the most part, it was all infantry and bikes, and I killed everything but a unit of bikes. And then red or paint was my MVP. But let's see, he super like you could see the score, right? It's super close, and the difference was his banners. Basically, I just was able to knock his banners off because of my extra mobility and my ability to just like as soon as I touch a unit, it goes away. And honestly, I think if I'm not Evil Sons, I don't win this game, right? I really do. Maybe if I'm Death Skulls, I win it because all my infantry's OBSEC. But all the extra mobility and the extra advance and charge that Evil Sons provided me is really what did this for me. Had I not had that advance and charge with faster than use, I wouldn't have won. And had I not had red or paint, I wouldn't have won. And I'll tell you why. The big swing was turn 3. So we played. What mission was this? I think this was Death and Zeal. Yeah. And I was like, this was one game where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna win this. I haven't seen Gene Stealer Cult on the table in so long that I don't like. I used to have a GSC army that I dabbled with, so I know them a little bit just because I have like a weird way of remembering things with this game. But outside of that, like I haven't seen them on the table in so long. I didn't know if and how they really changed. So we did Death and Zeal, right? Uh, let's see. There we go. So we had. I was able to get my war boss kind of right by the middle of the table, and Cowboy Larry was right behind him. And Cowboy Larry had just one shot something, and that dude again. That dude was just like, "What the heck?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's what he does, man." And he was like, So I have, and he was telling me, he's like, I got a buddy that plays orcs, and he always just puts brutal but cunning on the war boss on a bike. And I was like, yeah, that's really good, especially with the kill a claw. And he's like, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, but this guy's 65 points and does effectively the same thing. And he was like, he's how many points? And I was like, yeah, so dumb. And he was just like, oh my gosh. So he brought his gene stealers, right? Kind of, and I hope you all are looking at my cursor, but he kind of brought his gene stealers up And I knew where he was going to go. He had to, because I had like 10 knobs just chilling right here on an objective. And so I brought my war boss kind of up, and I was on my wog, so I had my invuln, and I brought Cowboy Larry right behind him. So he moved his Gene Stealers in a way that my war boss, in order for him to charge Cowboy Larry, he had to charge the war boss. And I had the 2 command points for an interrupt. And he was like, I'm going to charge both of these guys. And I was like, all right, man, before you do, I want to remind you, because I did let him know. I do try to be forthcoming, right? I was like, just remember, he's got a fight last mechanic, and everything within engagement range fights last, so I'm going to get to swing before you here. And he was like, oh, shit. I forgot about that. And I was like, yeah, sorry, man. Like, he's like, well, I guess I got to send them all into the knobs, which makes sense. You know, if you can kill my knobs or at least dwindle their strength down, that's going to help you a lot. But then back here, he had brought in some acolytes, and this was like this was the big swing, because I had 1 grot here, and then I had my Death Killer War Trike here, and the Death Killer War Trike also hit something, and he was just like, oh god, this is dumb. So he charged his acolytes, made the charge, charged. It was like, God, it had to have been 20 Gene Stealers, maybe like 18 into my knobs. But then he had to decide where he wanted to swing. He was like, do I swing and make sure I kill the grot so that I can try to deny you points? Or do I swing and try to kill a bunch of your knobs to try to, you know, like hamper some of your damage output? And he opted to kill the grot, which I'm not saying is wrong. Because that wasn't what really swung the game. What swung the game was me being able to put my war boss in a position to be like, no, you're going around me. I'm not playing. So it was one of those where he decided to kill the grot to deny me points, and he did, and he put a lot of damage on my war trike, but he didn't kill it. And then he took like a D3 mortals because I got my 5 up on the war trike, and then I interrupted with the knobs. And again, you know, it's one of those where I talk to people before stuff, and they're always like, "Yeah, I play against orcs, you know, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, man." And then, you know, I was like, "All right, I'm gonna put 5 knobs into this squad and 5 knobs into this squad. They have choppas and big choppas." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, I can only wound you on 3s, and these are strength 6, so I'm just gonna roll or strength 6 or 8 because I'm on the wog." And he's like, "Okay." I said, "So I'm gonna roll all these together. Is that fine with you? It's gonna be the same no matter what." And he's like, "Sure." I was like, all right, so it's going to be 25 dice out of this 5 and 25 dice out of this 5. And he was just like, what? And I was like, yeah, they're 3 attacks base plus 1 for the Wog is 4 attacks, and then they get an additional 1 for their Choppa. So it's five attacks per dude. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, so and it's 2s because I'm next to the war boss, and then it's 3s because I can't wound you on 2s. So it's 2s and 3s, and he picked up all but one of them. He was like, none of my local orc players do this. Like, what is happening right now? And I was like, I don't know, man. Sorry. But yeah, that was like the clutch for me, was just being able to just bam wipe his Gene Stealers out, because what ended up happening was that I just had a clear path to come to this objective at that point. And honestly, that might have even been turn 2. It might not have been 3. But I just had a clear path, and I just came and was just like, die, right? Like at the end of the game, he had a unit of bikes that held this objective just so he could make sure he had points, and that was it. You know, and like I said, he did score well. But like when his 20 Gene Stealers died, everything unraveled for him, and it was just he lost so much of his killing power at that point that I was able to just kind of keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and applying pressure. And again, faster than use and behind enemy lines, super clutch, right? Because I was able to tag him in his deployment zone, and especially because it's the 18-inch no man's land in the middle, I was able to tag some Gene Stealers in his deployment zone. I whiffed. He rolled good saves, uh, but I didn't lose my whole unit in the counter swing, and that was super clutch, right? So I was able to just consistently score uh, behind enemy lines, and then get the good bits. Honestly, like my mega knobs are what scored it. I got to a point where I was just like, all right, my mega knobs are doing it. Like, I'm not. I need points. I don't need killing. And then the last round, round 5, hit guard. Also, again, just a phenomenal good dude. I got hammered and I made a couple of really key mistakes, and it really is what sealed the deal. And we talked about it afterward, and he was like, Jesus, I didn't even think about that. And, I was like, yeah, had I done like one or two things, like you probably still win this game, but I'm not scoring 35. I'm probably scoring 65 to 85. And as you can see here, like I said, I lost it during deployment. I should have put my Coptas and probably my Storm Boys in deep strike. Had I done that, he was very aggressive because he went first and he was very aggressive. And it's one of those where when we looked at the table, so that and again, I'm not blaming the tables. I'm blaming myself. I'm just saying that because the tables were a little bit wider than normal and they were still using the GW layout, there were some shooting lanes that wouldn't normally be there, and it allowed him to tag a lot more of my stuff than he would have. And I just didn't like I didn't deep strike anything the whole day, so I just kind of went into it thinking, all right, we're just going to keep putting everything on the table. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Um, and that was my fault, right? If I put my Coptas and my Storm Boys in deep strike, I have way more room in my deployment zone for one, and he has way less targets to shoot at. So there's that, right? So what it does is it gives him less to shoot at, and knowing that my Coptas can come down and my Storm Boys can come down anywhere like that is going to get him to be a lot less aggressive. Because when he won that roll off, he was super aggressive, and you know, it was just like, oh no, all right. Um, but again, super fun dude. I did kill two of his tanks, I think, one tank and a Sentinel. I didn't score anything on behind enemy lines. And it's one of those where I got one get the good bits. And again, that was. I don't remember why I didn't get it turn one, honestly. Maybe I did get it turn one and I didn't get it turn two and I just forgot to score it or something. But yeah, no, it's one of those where, like I said, as soon as we started going, I was like, oh shit, I should have done this. Um, there weren't really any standout moments. Larry did again solo a Lehman Russ, so that was cool. Meganobs did a lot of work into whatever they touched, but again, they didn't get to shoot a lot or hit a lot. I also picked up 200 points to Coptas on a failed leadership rolls. On one roll, I lost one Copta right. I needed a 6 to fail. I picked that one up, and then the two that were left, I rolled dub ones. So I picked up 3 to 1 leadership test. And that is what it is. That's just one of those where the orc leadership mechanics are just really shitty, and there needs to be some kind of fix to that. Because my 50-point models should not be able to fail after losing one model. I don't care what anybody says, right? That should not be an interaction. Uh, and then, like I said, Coptas and Stormboys in reserves or deep strike, they can both inherently deep strike. And it would have limited what he could shoot turn one, and it would have kept him from being nearly as aggressive. So, like I said, it's one of those where lessons learned. And when we got done, we talked about it, and he was like, honestly, I didn't even think about putting anything into reserves. He said, it just once I knew you didn't have to jump, that was it. And I was like, no, that's fair. Uh, is what it is. And like I said, super nice dude. We talked about a lot of the game, and he was like, "Yeah, no, if you'd have," and he agreed. It's one of those where if I'd have had things in reserves and he wasn't able to be as aggressive because the Coptas, while they're not going to kill anything in his army, they can at least put a lot of damage and then be able to ramming speed charge to tie them up. Like they could have presented a good problem or a big problem had I been smart with him instead of a dumbass. But sometimes it be like that. But yeah, no, we both agree. It's one of those where that probably cost me 30 to 50 points in scoring just because I picked everything up rather than being able to do things to chip wounds and get extra mobility out of it. So again, lesson learned. If I hit that matchup again, there's a good chance I just put stuff in deep strike. So with the list currently, I did go 3-0 at an RTT, which was super cool. I have been able to score well. Um, I averaged 73 points per game at the GT and I was in the average of 80s at the RTT, and I'm well above the orc average right now. I forget what it is, but it was like in the mid 60s. So I'm able to score pretty well, even though I don't have OBSEC. The extra mobility has allowed me to, jump the board, get to behind enemy lines. If you've got just like cheap throwaway units on objectives, it does allow me to tag them a lot easier and just to kind of force you into bad positions. So that's also super helpful and useful. The all OPSEC armies are going to be tough matchups for me, but they are beatable. It's just one of those where I have to play a little better than I did when I played it. And I may have to just like point in some boys or some B snag of boys at some point. I don't know. I'm not a fan of boys and how they interact in this edition. And even last edition, I ran them, but I didn't run like hordes of them. Usually it was like 45ish was my kind of sweet spot, like a 3 by 15. So it's one of those where I'm not sure. I definitely need to tweak a few things. And honestly, what'll probably end up happening is I'll probably just rebuild from the ground up because that's just how I am. Bikes, absolute beast of a unit, right? They are okay at doing damage. Like the strength 4 is just kind of meh, especially because like anything that came out in the last 6 months has like T8. So it's just like, sure, dude, you got it. But they do soak more shooting than they should because of them being -1 to hit, And when I've got the 5-up invuln for being on the WOG, that just helps, So it's one of those where even the guard players were just like unable to just one shot my bikes because of them being -1 to hit. Like it was so relevant. I may consider pointing in a KFF to help protect from alpha strikes, but if I do that, I need to start freeing up some command points, which means I either drop a boss or I drop Larry. If I do one or the other, there's a good chance I drop Larry and try a double boss list and just have one be a support boss and one be a smash boss, right? Because if I put a war boss on Warbike, I can give him faster than use, and then I can give him follow me lads. And what follow me lads does is if he makes a charge, my whole army adds one to charge rolls when they charge that target. So I can at least have an 8-inch rerollable charge if I decide to deep strike a unit. And that could be pretty relevant and or spicy. So that might be a thing I do, or at least try out. And I might start bringing the Beast Boss on Squigosaur because one of my favorite loadouts with him is Resmecha's Red or Paint, and then Midas Right because Midas Right puts him at Strength 7, so he becomes Strength 8 on the WOG, and then excuse me, the Resmecha's Red or Paint gets him moving 13 inches, so it's one of those where he can really like maneuver, and he's not amazing in melee, but he does do some work. And when he's strength 7 and strength 8, he's a lot better than his base strength of 6. So it's one of those where I'm going to tinker around a little bit. I think this week when we go to play, I know I got to get the Drukari out because I got a league game to get in. But outside of that, I may just throw some AdMech on the table for a little bit of a change for this week. And then right back to the boys next week. Let's go. And then I'm gonna do some shameless achievement bragging. It's just one of those where you got to sometimes, right? Like nobody else is gonna tell you how awesome you are, so you got to tell yourself how awesome you are sometimes, and that's just how life is, man. Be proud of what you do. You don't have to like rub it in people's faces, but just be proud of what you do. I did raise Evil Sun's win rate to 50% with my RTT last weekend, so I'm guessing that after this GT that I just did, they're going to be 50 to 60% somewhere in there. It does depend on how many other players used Evil Suns. And man, if Evil Suns hit 60% win rate, nerf, bam, that's it. Data Slate, Evil Suns, too good. Because and again, I'm joking. It's just one of those where it's super funny because that is kind of how it ends up being sometimes. I did win best in faction. You can see the picture of my trophy on the right. There were multiple orc players. I think there was 3 or 4, and I finished with the highest placing out of all of them at 23rd, I think it was, and the rest of them were in the 30s ish. Like so again, super proud of that. I'm more proud of being the best war boss there than I am of anything else I did. You know, uh, and then for best in faction, I did get a Custodes combat patrol. So there's a good chance I'm going to have some Custodes mega knobs. Like I think that's what we're going to end up doing with them. I thought about trading it or selling it. I'd rather trade it than sell it, but unfortunately, a lot of people are just like, I just want to buy it. And I'm like, I don't really want the money, guys. Like, I'd rather just trade it for more models. But, and I know I could take the money and buy more models, but it's just one of those where that's extra effort that I don't want to do, and I'd rather just kit bash them into mega knobs at that point. Four of us went down, right? We all went down to, because we're in Northwest Indiana, and so four of us went down to this event, and three of us. So one of us. Let's start with one of us. One of us won one game. It was our Dark Angels player, but every game he scored 80 plus points, and they were all within like 5 to 10 point games. So he played very well. He scored very well. He just wasn't able to kind of get over that hump. But also, he took a year off from 40K, and I think this was either his first or second event in over a year. So I'm super proud of him because he did great. And that is our boy over at Dankless Wargaming. He did great. I couldn't be happier for him because, man, to go to a GT and just consistently score that well with your army, even if you lose, you got to be like, okay, that's fine. Some days it just is the way it is. Like he was never just shithoused out of a game. It was always, this is a close game, this is a good game, this is a fun game, and that's awesome. The rest of us went 3-2. Two of us won Best in Faction, and that was myself and Alex, the Tau player. And then our Space Wolf player, Zach. I don't know where the other Space Wolf players landed, but he went 3-2. He did really well. And so that was really cool, you know. And honestly, one of his losses was to Alex because he ended up hitting Alex, and it was on a very open board because it was the new GW layout, and that one is rough to play on if you hit a shooting army. So it's one of those where he hits another melee army, he maybe goes 4-1. Who knows? But again, at that point, it's a totally different path to victory. So who knows? But I'm super proud of everybody that came out and played from the team. Super proud of everything that we all accomplished, and I'm very happy with how it ended up. You know, I took a very kind of memey list, and actually Zach ended up taking a memey list, and even Alex. Like, I don't think any of us took like what is considered the cookie cutter meta list for our army, and generally we all did really well. So I can't complain, right? Had a good time. I won more games than I lost, and I did it with some weird jank, so I'm happy. And like I said, so we're going to be back to Drukari at least this week to finish the league. And I'm playing Zach's Space Wolves, so we'll see how that goes. I might could get destroyed, maybe not. We will see. Uh, Want to talk again? So we're going to be consolidating from Twitch to YouTube. I think I'm going to just focus on one platform and see if that kind of helps or benefits me. And so we'll be probably dropping the Twitch links here soon. If I do drop it, it'll be within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I want to do some streams on YouTube, kind of see how this goes, see if it changes anything, uh, because it's one of those where I feel like it's making extra work for me, and I'm not seeing any kind of payout for that extra work. So I'm going to try it this way and see if that kind of changes anything. And as always, if you like the content, you can support me on Patreon. I'm not going to twist your arm and beat you over the head with it. I will just tell you that I'm appreciative for it. The money that we make on Patreon generally just goes to buying terrain and making it better for the community to run events. Like it is not my like beer money or even gas money at that point. It's literally just this is the money that I use to kind of make events better for the community. And then, yeah, that's it. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you like the breakdowns that I'm able to provide of things. And Friday, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about something Friday. And then Thursday, we will have a stream game. I don't know what that matchup's going to be yet. I do have Adepticon at the end, but I am not playing. I am working at the end of March. But then after Adepticon, my life kind of calms down and start having some free weekends so I can start getting back into just making sure I'm making good quality content again. So I look forward to doing that with everybody. I know a lot of people have liked my recaps and my breakdowns. So I think like that's one of the things that I think I'm going to settle into is just kind of recaps, breakdowns, and then orcs and some elves. And I think that's where we're just going to settle into our niche. And then obviously some core rules interactions. Because to if I can make you a better Warhammer player, that makes the community better because we all make each other better and we just get better. And it's more fun that way. If you become a better player because of me, and then the next game we play is closer, that's a better interaction for me and it's a better interaction for you because if one of us is just always ruffle stomping the other one, that doesn't help anybody, right? So, again, thanks, and we'll see you